look back at the last Forge FC contest.
Simply stunning stuff. And finally, their goal.
Here is Match and Review.
My word, what a rocket.
With Anthony Urciuoli on the Forge Audio Network.
Hey, Forge fans, it's the Forge Audio Network, the official home, and I'm so happy that I can continue to say this for at least another year. The official home of your reigning, defending, undisputed Canadian Premier League champions, Forge FC. We are all still just coming down from the high that was Saturday night in the CPL final. Listen, you know what happened. I assume you knew what happened. Forge FC, down a goal all season. I feel like we've been talking about this club, some of the inconsistencies, and whether this could be beneficial down the road. Learning how to win. Not that this team had to learn how to win, but every year presents different challenges. When I say learn how to win, I mean being comfortable in different types of games, different styles, and learning how to win in different ways. You're not always going to blow out an opponent. You're not always going to dominate possession like you have in the past. The league is getting better. And by the way, Forge is in large part responsible for that. Every year, you can pick any sports league you want. Every sports league is a copycat league. Whatever the best club is doing, other clubs start following suit. That's how it should be. I mean, this is how this works. And because of that, Forge has set this bar, and we've seen the other clubs, slowly but surely, have been catching up, adapting to that play style that Bobby Smirniotis has incorporated since basically day one. And because of that, it was a grind this year. It was not easy. For Forge, they admitted it. It was tough at times to just find the motivation to play at Vancouver, even against rivals, York coming in town. When you've played in these just huge matches, these important matches, regionally, domestically, and at just a heightened level, at an expert level at times, it is so hard to maintain that, and then to also just replicate that in matches that just quite frankly don't mean as much. So the regular season, bit of a grind. Just trying to maintain a certain level of play. There were a lot of dips in there, and it showed. But at the end of the day, this club got what they needed. They needed to finish in the top two just to get that simpler path and potentially host a CPL final. They do. They finished second. They did what they needed to do, just exactly what they needed. They found it, just that they mustered up enough to just get to where they just needed to be. And then once the playoffs started, once the chips were down, once everything was just more meaningful and more was at stake. This team has the ability to flip a switch like no other can. You always hear about going into the playoffs with momentum. We hear that in every single sport. We need momentum going into the... This club didn't need any momentum. The final game of the regular season ended. It wasn't a result they wanted, but it didn't matter because they still finished where they needed to. What happened? Playoffs start, boom, switch, ready to go. None of this momentum, nothing. This team just has that ability. And they win that opening playoff match at Cavalry. That match, you could almost sense around the league this, here's Forge. They're back. Apparently they didn't go anywhere. They flipped the switch. And so the playoff game, that match against Cavalry, they win. They play maybe their best game of the season. And Cavalry came into that match with all the momentum, an absolutely dominant regular season. They're at home, a place they hadn't lost since mid-June. And Forge comes in and wins. When that happens, everyone in the league, everything changes. The complete complexion of the playoffs change because the realization that Forge is here. They never left. The Forge that we've been used to, they're here. And they are now hosting a CPL final. You talk about just finding motivation to do things you haven't done before and to just win in different ways. One thing they hadn't done, wasn't hard to find motivation for this one. To win the final at home in what you knew was going to be a hot crowd, ended up being just a tick under 14,000. In fact, they missed 14. I can't remember the exact number, but they missed that 14,000 by like 18 people. It was a very small amount. It was that close. So I'm rounding up. Okay, I'm rounding up. Because there were, just in terms of people there to observe what was happening, there were more than 14,000. So we'll sit at 14,000. But the crowd was going to be hot. This is an opportunity, too, for Forge, who, listen, you're in a community where you are still building your brand. It doesn't matter how many times you win. 5 years into a pro sports league it's not enough to get the kind of traction you're looking for yet. So it's always going to be this constant every year. And every club that goes through this is, we're still newish. We're going to be saying newish for a long time still, because that's how long it takes for a new league, a new sports team to gain traction. And you look at the chart and everything, attendance is going up, everything is on the right trajectory, but there are still some challenges. So when you get 14,000 people to a Forge match, many of which they've maybe never watched pro soccer live before, and certainly haven't been to a Forge match. But this is an opportunity now, because what happens in this match can carry and will carry over into next season. So the club shows up, had a great start, loved the start to that match. Things dipped a little. All of a sudden, Cavalry came on. Forge looked like they were playing not to lose, and they ended up giving up the first goal in extra time. By the way, Cavalry earned that lead. They should have been leading to that point because they did have some grade A opportunities. And if not for Tristan Henry, who knows if we even get to extra time? Because, two saves stand out, but the one, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking, the right-handed stop, there was no, if you listen to the match in review, we'll talk about that in a moment. And I should mention, we are going to be joined shortly by Alexandre Gangué-Ruzic from CanPL.ca. I saw him at the match. He was there. He's also, I don't know that anyone follows Canadian soccer like this man does, so we'll talk to him shortly. But for that, at the end of that match, Adam Jenkins, voice of One Soccer, called the match. He's called all the Forge matches this season. I had a chat with him. The interviews, it's available you can find it on YouTube, in the latest match in review. And he talked about that Henry save and how there's no, because I guess Henry was asked after the match, about this. What were you thinking? How did it feel? Those kinds of things. And Henry was just kind of like, I wasn't thinking. What can you possibly think? Things are happening within a tenth of a second. There's no time to think. That is where your skills, your preparation, every moment that Tristan Henry has spent in goal was leading up to that one moment, a quick reaction, muscle memory's already been built, and it was an incredible stop. It was a game-saving stop, and it allowed Forge those extra 30 minutes of extra time. Now, Cavalry takes a lead anyway, and I was on the sidelines when that goal went in from Cavalry, and I saw, because David Chouanier, the fans were kind of chanting for him behind me, and Chouanier ends up, getting ready, warming up. You knew he was coming on. It was obvious he was coming on. They were just waiting for the right moment. Bobby Smirniotis and his staff were. And as Chouanier is standing at the sideline waiting to come on, Cavalry scores. And I talked to David as well, and that interview is available in that match interview. And he was like, he goes, you got to be kidding me. I've been waiting all this time to get on the field, and now they score while I'm literally seconds from stepping onto the field. And something happened. You go from playing not to lose to all of a sudden the reality of you are going to lose, just the switch. We talked about that switch. They were able to flip it when they needed it. And if you rewatch those two goals, which I've rewatched them about 17 times. I'm sure a lot of you have as well. But even the moments leading up to it, you had a feeling that they were at least going to tie this match. With the determination, and looking at just the guys that were around the ball at all times. It was Choinière, it was Borges, it was Badi Banga, it was Becker. You had Mandrakar James from his center back position up in the area for most of that extra time. And you're looking at the bodies around the ball and you're like, okay, there is way too much talent, experience. One of these guys is going to break through. And it was Badi Banga with an unbelievable goal. And Ali Musi's goal before that was spectacular. Badi Banga scores a spectacular one. And then Tristan Borges in Olympico from the corner. I had said that I didn't think that on some level you're expecting that to go in or you don't try it, but also you're running the numbers in your head. Statistically, is this the best? Is this likely to go in? I don't know about that, but I'm going to try it anyway. And not many players would have the confidence to try that. But that's what you get with this lineup. Up and down this lineup, guys who have been there, who have done it, who have trained their entire lives for this moment. And they're big guys where they're big guys when they needed it most, both in that final semifinal. I don't even know what the official name for it. I don't know if there is an official name for it. That 1v2 match, I think it's officially called a semifinal, but that's really confusing because then there was another semifinal, whatever that was called, the 1v2. But in that match, you look at who stepped up. Becker comes to mind. And then the final, you have Henry playing big. You have Becker there. You have Badi Banga. You have Borges. You have Choinière. The Ashton Janssen was just an absolute rock. I could name every single player because, no one had a bad game in that final. But this is the result. 4 titles in the last 5 seasons. Now, next year, not only can you look forward to potentially a 5th title, a lot of focus next year is going to be on the Concacaf Champions Cup and what Forge can do regionally. They've already impressed regionally. Believe me, read some of the comments on the Forge social channels and you'll get a lot of people. Hey, I'm in Colombia, I'm in Peru, and Forge is the team I choose to, because a lot of people who are soccer fans, they'll choose favorite teams in every country and in every league. Just so it's fun to follow the different leagues. You pick a team, something to cheer for. There's some stakes now, it makes it more interesting. There are a lot of Forge fans not living in Canada that have seen them, what they do on a regional, and that's why the qualifying for CONCACAF is so important, just even as a brand. It's big, and Forge will be there. Cavalry will be there, and for all the rivalry and all that, if Forge is there, that's what we wanted. If you could have chosen another team to represent the CPL in that tournament, just from a neutral perspective, just from if you're a fan of the league and you want it to grow and you want it to thrive, and Cavalry is the other club that should be there. These are the ambassador clubs for this league, and I hope they both do well in CONCACAF next year. I know sometimes it can be painful to root for Cavalry, but whatever, any CPL club on any level of success is good for every club. It's good for the entire league. It's good for the fans. It's good for everybody. So the league will be well represented in CONCACAF next year. All right, let's do this. Let's keep this rolling. Alex Gangué-Ruzic, CanPL.ca. He has his fingers on the pulse of Canadian soccer all over the world, both men's and women's. A regular on the Forge Audio Network, and he joins us now. So Alex, you've seen a lot in this sport. You've seen it in person. You've watched a lot of it. You just cover so much of it. What happened on Saturday at Tim Hortons Field? Was that? I mean, where does that rank, even just in terms of finishes that you've witnessed in person?
That's wow. Well, it's an extremely difficult thing to profess just because I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. I'll be completely honest, just because for that there to be a sequence like that in any game is, one team scores a fantastic goal to go up, take the lead, the emotions, what it meant for them. That was the first time Forge was trailing in a final. That's the first time Cavalry was able to score in a final. All these things, you're like, whoa, what's going on? Amazing goal. And the next thing you know, there's just another amazing goal before the dust even settles. And then Tristan Borges, Olympico. I mean, that's something as well. 111th minute of a final. I think that's something that I think we've, even like in the aftermath, people are like, okay, we witnessed that. But I think that's something that's not going to sink in for 5-10 years, especially just finals aren't supposed to be like that. Yes, maybe we had our 22 World Cup this year, the men's World Cup, where Mbappe and Messi had their show. For the most part, finals aren't like this. They're 0-0, cagey. Someone scores a header off a corner. It's an own goal. It's something ugly. It's just get it over the line, lift your trophy, and everyone forgets the game. I think this is one of those rare finals where the moment is almost going to overshadow the trophy lift. Like, I'm not thinking about, Forge lift another trophy. I'm just thinking about all the goals and everything. So yeah, I think it was just extremely surreal, especially that it happened in extra time. This wasn't the start of the game, like people coming out full guns a blazing. It was the end of a game, and that was so surreal.
And we talked a bit off air, just that first 90 minutes, and you kind of said, like, I don't know what we were expecting in extra time, just maybe more of just a tight, because Forge did look like they were playing not to lose after a pretty good start. I mean, Cavalry had so many chances to prevent it from even getting to extra time. But Cavalry scores that goal, and then something flipped, and it just so happened that Chouanier was waiting to be subbed on. And we know he can be a catalyst for things as well. But even you look at, leading up to those goals, the guys that Becker had to jump in his step, Borges, Chouanier, Badibanga, the key guys really just were able to turn it up to a different level. But did you get that feeling that maybe the clubs were just trying not to lose in the opening stages?
That was interesting because I think it looked like Cavalry really wanted to go for it. And I think they kind of said it. I think in the pre-show on the broadcast, Tommy Wilden Jr. said, look, we want to go for it. We want to go out in a final. Sometimes it can be cagey. But I think on Forge's perspective, they also understood the threat that Cavalry poses. I mean, you could just look what Ali Musi did and what all game he was knocking on the door. Forge did they concentrated a lot of just numbers and effort to try and slow down Musi, try to get numbers behind the ball. So it was something where I think for Forge, it was more just being wary of the Cavalry threat because he just didn't want to open things up and get into a track meet. And yeah, that's kind of what led to the 90 minutes. It was really more of Cavalry kind of on the front foot, pushing, but Forge were resisting everything. It was kind of one where I'm like, okay, it was a great defensive performance from Forge. But to Cavalry's credit, they also weren't giving up anything in transition, which I'm sure is what Forge wanted. And then it just, it feels like when that Musi goal went in, it was coming. Like Tristan Henry had to make some great saves. Cavalry were definitely waiting for a breakthrough. But then it was fascinating because Forge kind of at that point were like, well, I think it was convenient that Cavalry subbed on another defender. Ali Musi had, ran his race. He was out of legs. And I think that helped Forge, that Cavalry all of a sudden were on the back foot and Forge were able to capitalize. But yeah, it definitely feels like Forge was playing a bit more defensive until that goal went in and then everything just shifted.
Yeah, and we talk about things getting lost in spite of all of the things that happened. But I mean, Tristan Henry, it just... the one save stands out with his right hand. There's no thinking there. I mean, that is muscle memory. That's years of experience. You can't teach something like that. And again, it's fitting that Henry, who a lot of fans think maybe he's been overlooked going into this season, and he ends up winning the trophy, and he makes a huge save to eventually lead his team to victory. You really couldn't have scripted this any better.
Oh, that was, I think Tristan Henry definitely... I'm sure had a smug smile for a lot of those who maybe overlooked him in award voting across the season. And yeah, that's the thing that you want from your goalkeeper, because Tristan Henry over the last 4 to 5 years, at his best, he's been a fantastic shot stopper and great to watch. But also, unfortunately, he's carried some of that reputation from earlier in this Forge stint, some of the big games in CONCACAF, some of the errors he's had. And I think it's fascinating that you look across these last two finals, he's put up some of his best performances in those games, because I think now you can see that maturity he's really brought to his game. He shows up in the biggest of moments, and maybe overall across the season, you can forget there's games, good games, bad games, but what matters is what was showing up in the big moments. And man, I think Tristan Henry did that across these two playoff games.
Yeah, anything tactically from either side that maybe jumped out at you? Did that side of things, more the inside, we talk about tactics, was it pretty much what you expected from both sides?
I think there were some interesting nuances. I think the big thing was the width of Tim Hortons Field. It always is a
Mm.
factor, like how our team's going to play to that. I thought Forge did a really good job of neutralizing that width by going to that real like back five. You don't see that very often from Forge. That like off the ball, it was flat across the back, and I think that was good because it took away that space from Moosey. And then when he'd cut in, that took away the space from Aird,
Mm.
who loves to make those overlaps, and ditto on the left side. Um, so I thought that was interesting how the width was handled. I thought it was interesting that Forge kind of sacrificed the middle. Like they left a guy like Abubakar Sissoko on the bench, and they really, again, tried to put emphasis on the width. And then as for Cavalry, I thought it was just very interesting them play on the front foot in the final, want to be aggressive, and try to go through the wide areas themselves. So I thought it was very interesting that there was so much emphasis on width, because sometimes these teams, with all the talent they have on both sides in midfield, that sometimes it can be a bit of a battle in that area. And I think both coaches kind of realized that if they got a bit too excited, that would leave space on the flanks, which, as we know, at Tim Hortons Field, you don't want to leave that free, their team, with how big the field is.
Mm-hmm. Well, we know how happy Forge fans are after this past weekend, but get us outside of our bubble a little bit. As a neutral, obviously, if you're a neutral, you're probably hoping there's a different champion than Forge. But from a league standpoint, when you're trying to develop a league, there's nothing you can do about preventing a team from winning so much. But what does it mean for the rest of the league and the other clubs and those fan bases when you do have the same winner 4 out of the 5 seasons? Can that hinder growth a little bit?
I think there's different ways to look at it. I think personally, anytime you have top dogs in a league, say,
Mm.
and I think there's no doubt four playoff championships in 5 years, a regular season title as well. We can't forget 5 finals. Forge has been the top dog, and I think that's good for teams, because I think that sets the standard. I think Pacific in 2021 shows what you can do, because I think that Pacific team they built that year, like they loaded up and they were really like, let's go win a title, let's go beat Forge, and they kind of did. And I think this is what the standard that's going to go around. I think Cavalry this year, they don't have as great of a season as they do if they're not chasing Forge. Like, all right, let's go win a trophy, let's go try and win a double. And I think Cavalry, they can be extremely proud of the season they had. The fact that right until the 100th minute of the final, they were this close to a double. And I think more teams are going to follow. I think Halifax having a fantastic year is another example of teams pushing. I think it can only be good as long as teams channel that energy and be like,
Right.
look, this is the standard. You go meet the standard. I think, of course, the danger is if one pulls away and everyone kind of, defeats, puts their hand up like, we're never going to catch Ford. Let's just chase second, or, let's chase third, or et cetera. But Cavalry's not going away. That's for sure. I think Cavalry's always going to be pushing Forge. And then I think Pacific's, join that group. I think Halifax wants to join that group, and they showed this year that they can be in that group. I know, York, you can't forget that they made the playoffs and caused all sorts of problems for teams. I'm sure Valor, Vancouver, everyone's going to want to push and join that. Ottawa, of course, last year gave Forge a good run until the final. So I think it can only help as long as each team stays committed. I think the big thing is going to be the signings,
Mm.
adding depth, improving all those sorts of little areas that will pay off for you over the course of the season.
Are there some guys in the CPL that you could see making a jump next year and maybe moving on to some of the bigger leagues?
Oh, 100%. I think this was, you know, an interesting season for a lot of guys in the early to mid 20s, which are certainly going to be looked at. And I think across the board, I mean, you can start with Forge, someone like Kwasi Poku already had European interest at his young age. You can wonder how hard it will be to keep him. Ditto with the Woobens Passius. He's just scored for fun. You feel like at a certain point after that many seasons of scoring consistently, you'll get a look. And then across the league from the likes of Sean Young at Pacific, some of the other young talents that they've had there consistently. You go across Matteo De Brienne at Valor, Dan Nimick in Halifax. There's an interesting cohort of guys that can definitely move on. So I'm fascinated to see. I think especially MLS teams and teams here are going to look at some of those defenders and midfielders because I think they're realizing there's some real value there. And then in terms of some of the attackers, I could see some of them heading to Europe because, unfortunately, one caveat of MLS, they love to spend money on attackers with the DP system. But in Europe, maybe there could be some spots for some guys like a Pacius who, as a striker, might struggle to get an MLS not out of his own talent, but just because teams are going to want to get their $10 million strikers. But in Europe, there would definitely be more an opportunity for him.
You know, that I've already seen that the Borges Olympico making its round on social media from all kinds of different sport accounts and websites. And just as a showcase, I mean, that final did a great job just from that standpoint. And then you look ahead to CONCACAF. You have Cavalry, you have Forge, arguably probably the two best representatives of the league playing regionally. So when we talk about this CONCACAF tournament, just how important is it as a showcase? You know, I don't know how the inner workings of scouting works, you know, in the sport across the globe, but these tournaments, is it just an extra, you know, just a bigger stage for this league and for these players to get more exposure throughout the world?
100%. I think it brings legitimacy, just being able to go in CONCACAF because continentally that stuff matters. I think even if it's little, but it helps you within the region. If you go up against teams, for example, there's so many areas you can go. I think, for example, if CPL teams, I think you saw Forge's success in CONCACAF League that helped them attract some interesting CONCACAF players. Like, because there's a lot of talent in the likes of countries like Panama, Honduras, Costa Rica. If you can, become a premier destination for those players, I think there's some good internationals that can be found there. And then I think, if you're pushing Liga MX teams, you're pushing MLS teams around, around the world would be like, they'll look at North America. Of course, no Liga MX and MLS. How could you not? But they'd be like, whoa, what's this Canadian League? Forge Cavalry pushing teams in those leagues. Maybe we should pay attention. Maybe there's something to be had there. And I think, it just adds so much legitimacy to be put in those sorts of windows, I say, so to speak, because, I think, for, those sorts of competitions, they bring credence around the world. I mean, technically, there's a path where if one team catches lightning in a bottle, you're playing in a Club World Cup. So, that's a very, hard journey to occur, of course, but all that to say that when you're in the Champions Cup like that, it leads towards something like that. And I think teams around the world will pay attention. I think the big thing will be players and depth because there's just a different level to playing continentally. And I think we saw Forge when they made it to Champions League. They made some great signings that year. I think it was something where the players realized, like, oh, let's go be a part of something. Like Ashton Morgan was one off the top of my head, and there's a few others that signed. So I'm excited to see what Cavalry and Forge can do with this opportunity now. I'm sure they can get some very intriguing players.
Absolutely. Well, exciting end to an interesting season. Alex Gangué-Ruzic, what's next for you? Season's done, but I'm sure you're not done.
Yeah, I mean, we got MLS over here still on the West Coast. We got the Vancouver Whitecaps, so I'll be keeping an eye on them. And then, of course, our national teams are not done. I'm super excited for the women's national team to come here to BC for Christine Sinclair's farewell. It's going to be sad to see a legend go like that, but that's probably going to be bucket list games being in front of what's already projecting to be a sold-out BC Place and a sold-out Starlight, and then of course the men's national team in November, Copa America qualifier. So as you know, the sport of ours never sleeps. I'm sure you know that very well as well.
No, and you are the source for how we can follow you on Twitter. Are you still, or X or whatever we're calling it? Do they call it Xing now? What is the term? I don't even know.
I mean, these days probably I just call it Twitter because it's my defiance to Elon's reign.
Yes.
So you can still find me on Twitter for now, although I'm exploring other alternatives.
All right, I'm with you. Alex Gangué-Ruzic, as always, thank you so much. All right, Alex Gangué-Ruzic, if you have not seen the match in review from the final, and for those of you who have listened to, watched previous match in reviews, you know that there's a certain way we kind of do things. It's basically me just breaking down the match, going through the stats, analyzing what went right, what went wrong, key moments, that kind of thing, key storylines. But this one, for that match in review for a final, it's tough because, I mean, that focus on stats and possession, all that, it means nothing. It means nothing after a final because it is a zero-sum proposition. You either win the championship, you do not. Everything else is pointless because there's no game after that. You run through stats because you look at trends and, okay, what can they bring? What are the positives they can bring to next match? To sit there and look ahead to next season right after a final doesn't make it much sense. So Saturday's match in review was interesting. It was me on the field and right in front of the fans. I essentially hit record with about a minute left in stoppage time because I wanted to capture the final whistle and the final cheer. And fortunately, it was a win because I didn't know what I was going to do if they had lost that match, to be honest with you. That, as much as I cared about just the team winning and what it meant for the fans and the organization, from a selfish standpoint, they really needed to win that match. A match in review after a loss in the final, that's not a lot of fun, especially not when you're doing it involving the fans and the atmosphere and things like that at home. So fortunately, they won, and it was fun. We got to capture the moment live. It wasn't as clean and buttoned down as some of the other match in reviews and structured. But that's because it just wasn't a structured kind of game. There was a lot of chaos. It was great though. I mean, it was the exact kind of chaos you look for in a sporting event. The unpredictability of it, the roller coaster of emotions, the lows, the highs, and I thought the match in review captured all of that. So if you haven't yet, you can go on YouTube, check that out. The CPL final match in review. Also, this is a goodbye, but it's not I guess it's more of a we'll talk to you soon because there's a lot more coming. And if you have been following Forge through social media and other means, there's no shortage of reaction from players, coaches, fans, just analysts around the league. This is an ongoing story, and it'll continue because, the Forge Audio Network doesn't stop because the season stops. We have an off season with player movement and signings, and CONCACAF action starts pretty soon, I'm talking in the next couple of months. So there's a lot more coming. If you aren't subscribed, I suggest you do so. That's the easiest way to ensure you don't miss out. Wherever you get your podcast, subscribe to the Forge Audio Network. And like I said, I'm going to say goodbye, but it's not sad because we will talk to you very, very soon. It's been fun, though. Great year, incredible finish, culminating in what was the most extraordinary live sporting events I have ever been to in my entire... And I come from a media background, sports media background, covering all kinds of sports and events. And I've never been a part of anything like that. So it was fun, and we will talk to you, I promise, very, very soon.
This has been Match in Review with Anthony Urciuoli on the Forge Audio Network. For the latest on all things Forge FC, subscribe on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.